Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. As usual, please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so, and feel free to leave a comment and or suggestion down below if you have any questions or anything you want to see specifically. Alright, so let's jump into it. In this video, where I showed you guys how to create a PDF in Salesforce using Visualforce and Apex, I recently received this message from this person right here, basically asking if it was possible to create a PDF still using Visualforce and Apex, but also using a flow. And right here, I commented back, pretty much explaining how it might be possible to do so. But for today's video, I actually want to go ahead and show you guys how to do that in a video. So let's jump into it. For those of you that aren't familiar with this video, the code itself, it's pretty simple. Basically, we just created an Apex class, and inside of the constructor right here, we're basically just initializing these variables that we have created up here. One being the account record and the other one being two opportunities. And I believe in this org, the opportunities are children of the account object. So essentially, when this class is initialized, the constructor fires, it gets the account ID from some parameter, and then we go ahead and do a couple SQL queries to get that information. And essentially, in the Visualforce page, we have the link to the controller right here, and then we have some tags. Basically, we're saying that we don't want the HTML tag to be applied because we're going to do that ourselves, to hide the default Salesforce header, and also to render this page as a PDF. And you'll see here I have some basic HTML as well. In the head, we have our style tags, and then in the body, we have what will eventually be the PDF itself. And right here, all we have are just the tags that will basically, like I said, create this Visualforce page in a PDF format. Now, the video itself, I made this about a year ago, so it's not in great quality. And I'll probably make another video in the future that goes much more in depth as well. But for now, let's go ahead and kind of accomplish what that guy was asking for. So what I think I'm going to do is we'll create a Salesforce flow, and it'll be a screen flow that will allow the user to input an email address and then basically click a button that will call all of this code right here and just send that PDF as an email. And to do so, let's first go ahead and, I guess, update our code itself. To use Apex code in a Salesforce flow, there's a few things we have to do. The first one is to essentially create a method that has the invocable method annotation. And I'll leave all this documentation in the description box below, but long story short, by including this annotation in our method, it's basically telling the Salesforce flow that that method can be called by it. So you'll see here some examples. Essentially, it's just this annotation, and it has a label and a description, as well as some other labels, I believe, that you can attach to it. So if I scroll down here, here are all the different modifiers, as it's called, that you can add to it. For now, we're probably just going to use the label and the description so that we can easily identify which method that is in our Salesforce flow. But yeah, like I said, using this annotation right here, we're able to get access to that Apex method in our Salesforce flow. So let's go ahead and start doing that. What I'm going to do right here, and also I should probably mention as well, there are some gotchas when it comes to using this invocable method annotation. You'll see here, well, the ones I'm going to point out are basically that the method has to be static and public or global, and as well as when it comes to passing in arguments into that method, you can only use a list of objects or a list of objects. And we'll get back to that in a second. That's very important to know, but I'll get back to that in a second. For now, let's go ahead and just create our method itself. So like I said, it has to be either public or global. In this case, I'll just make it public, and it'll be public static. We're not returning anything, so we'll make it void. And for this one, I'll just call it generate PDF. And in here, we'll have our annotation. So we use the @ symbol, and this is called invocable method. And in here, let's use a label. I'll just call this email invoice PDF. That way we know what it's called when we're looking for it in our Salesforce flow. And let's also go ahead and give this a description. Why not? So in here, and actually It is single quotes, not double quotes. I've been doing a lot of JavaScript development lately, so a bit different. Anyways, here we'll just give a description of generates and emails and invoice PDF. Okay. When we do that, by using this annotation right here, like I said, we're not restricted to only passing in or having a parameter of list or a list of lists. And one of the things that we'll quickly run into right now is we have to provide this method some parameters such as the record ID of the account that we're looking for and also the email that we want to send that PDF to. But the problem is by invoking this, by having this annotation, you're only allowed to have one parameter. So as an example, let's go ahead and say we're going to have a list of strings right here. And right here will be like the emails that we want to pass through. And in reality, we're only going to send it to one. But let's suppose that we were going to build this out to support multiple email sends. If we were to then have another list of strings for our, like, let's say record IDs, we would get an error message right here. And let me go ahead and save this so that the error messages can populate. And it looks like I think I misspelled this. Oh, not misspelled, but I put a comma there. There is no comma needed. So let me go ahead and do that. And once we fix that little mistake, you'll see here that we have this new error saying only one parameter is supported on methods. So that's kind of like the first gotcha that I was talking about. We're only allowed to have one parameter passed in. And now the issue is we need to be able to pass in the record ID of the account as well as the email that we want. So we could just kind of make this a generic list right here, or not generic, but I guess it could be generic. Like we could just say something like args right here, and then we can go ahead and parse this out in here in our method. But the thing is, when we're building out our Salesforce flow, and I know this is a little bit abstract because I haven't created the Salesforce flow yet, we want to create a list variable in our Salesforce flow and pass it into this method here. But if we create a list, and I believe it's called a collection variable in our Salesforce flow, we'll get an error message if we leave this parameter as a list. And the reason being, I found this Stack Exchange right here. Basically, this person was asking how to pass in a list of strings to an Apex action using the flow builder. And the reason why he was having an issue, and probably doesn't show here, but basically you'll see here that he created a resource, which was just a collection variable. And you see here, he's populating that collection variable with all the other values that he needs. So he added 3 different values, basically 3 different elements into his list. And he tried to pass in that variable he created into this Apex action. So think of basically he was trying to call this method we created here from the Salesforce flow, but it wasn't showing him that variable itself. Well, it turns out that invocable method interface, it's bulkified. And you'll see here that this is the reason why it's bulkified. It allows them to map flows within Process Builder. And essentially, to make a long story short, that we'll actually need to create our parameter as a list of strings. And that's due to the nature of that interface being bulkified. So to kind of bring it all together, and I know this is kind of convoluted, but like I said, we need to make this into a list of strings. And that kind of covers our bases. And in here, basically, we just have to do a little bit more work to kind of extract our list of strings. But that's not a big deal. To do so, let's go ahead and first do that, I guess. Let's go ahead and parse out our information. So we're going to have one list. We're going to create a list right here to kind of parse this information out. The first thing we want to do is create a list of strings. And essentially, this is going to have that nested list. So I'm not really feeling very creative today, so I'm just going to call this nested. And right here, we're going to get our args and we're going to get our list right here. So we're getting the list inside of the list because we're not really worried about, I guess, right now, this is just a simple example. We're not really worried about the bulkified nature of this. And yeah, I'll probably make more videos in the future going over how all this works. But for now, I just kind of want to get this video out to show that it indeed is possible to use a flow for this purpose. So for now, we're just going to get our list that is nested. And then once we have that, let's go ahead and parse out the, I guess, email that we'll be receiving from that Salesforce flow, which we can do so by just saying nested 0, like so. And then as well as getting the record ID, which could be the second one right here. And you'll see here that, like I always preach, I guess, that this is by no means production code, that this is just meant to show what is possible within Salesforce. But you'll see here that I am making an assumption, and which could be dangerous, that the first element in that nested list will be the email and the second will be the record ID. And, we can't ensure that that's always the case, but that's just something to consider here, that this could potentially be dangerous if you're not careful. So let me go ahead and remove that error right there. But essentially with that, we received this list of strings as an argument from that Salesforce flow that we have yet to create, and we've parsed out what we need from it. So once we have that, we can now go ahead and create a page reference to our invoice PDF right here. And remember, when we create a page reference to a Visualforce page, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to call this controller. And conveniently, from that old video that we made, we already had our constructor do some things. You'll see here that the constructor expects to receive something from the parameter of that Visualforce page. So let's go ahead and make sure we do that. So we're going to say page reference. So we're creating a reference to that Visualforce page. I'll just call this PDF, or I guess invoice PDF probably would sound better. And we're going to use a new keyword to create the new page reference, like so. And then in here, we have some arguments. So inside of here, what we're saying is create a page reference to our Visualforce page. And we can denote that by saying apex-invoice PDF view. And that's just the default path to access a Visualforce page in Salesforce. And the constructor is expecting this param right here. So let's go ahead and say, use the question mark to denote that there's a parameter. And we'll say that is equal to plus the record ID that we got from our parameter right here. So with that, when the page reference is created, our invoice PDF controller will have all the information it needs to get the appropriate info and then pass those into our actual Visualforce page that gets rendered as a PDF. You'll see here, if you don't remember, if you've never seen the old video, I guess I wouldn't really recommend to watch that old video because it has terrible audio quality and it's kind of old. But you'll see here that it's making use of those variables within that account record. So once we have that, we've now created our page reference. And lastly, what I want to do is I want to create our email and the email attachment to send off this PDF that we've created. So to do so, we're going to make use of the messaging dot single, or actually let's create the email attachment first. So we'll say email file attachment, and I'll just call this attachment, I guess. We'll create a new instance of that. So new messaging dot email file attachment. And in here, let's go ahead and populate its properties. So what we want to do is we want to set the content type, and we have to specify that this is a PDF, which we can do so by saying application PDF, like so. So this lets this object know that we're going to give it a PDF. The next thing, we should probably give it a name, I guess. So we'll say attachment dot set file name. That's the name of the method, like so. Here, I guess we can just call this invoice PDF. That's fine. Next, let's give it the body. That's probably one of the most important things. And the body is basically going to be this PDF itself. To get the PDF, and I guess this is another gotcha to be aware of, our Visualforce page already has the tag up here of render as PDF. So all we need to do is just get the content itself. And I say that because if we go here and we type out the invoice PDF reference, you'll see here there is this method called get content as PDF. Well, if we do this, what's going to happen is this keyword is going to ensure that this Visualforce page gets rendered as a PDF. And if we use this method, it's basically going to try to encode it again, and you're going to get some gibberish. I'm pretty sure that's the case. Feel free to let me know if I'm wrong. So instead, what we should do is we should just get the content right here. Use this method, just get content. Because like I mentioned earlier, we're already using this tag to render as a PDF, so there's no need to use that other method again. Instead, just get it as is, because it's already rendering as a PDF. But if you weren't using that tag, then you might want to use the get content as a PDF method instead. With that, one last thing, I'm going to call this other method called set inline. And that is just because I want that PDF to be attached, to be an actual attachment. So I'm going to set this to false. And that just ensures that it will actually be an attachment in our email. So once we have all of that, let's go ahead and actually create the email itself. And I'm going to do so by saying messaging dot single email message, create a new instance of that. Messaging dot single email message, like that. And then we'll go ahead and fill out some of the properties as well. So, and actually I should probably give our object a name. So I'll just say mail. That's fine. What we're going to do is let's set the to address. So set to address right here. And instead, I'm going to use the other way of representing a list, which can be done by saying new string message. And then instead of that, I'm basically just initializing this string list in line. I'm just grabbing this email right here. And if we had multiple emails, then you just, let's say like email 2 or email 3 or whatever, that'd be the case. In this case, we're only going to expect to receive one email from our generate PDF method. So we're just using one email right there. Next, well, we should probably set the subject of our email. So I'm going to say set subject like that. And that's just a string. Inside of here, let's give it a subject. We'll just say this is the invoice PDF. I guess that's fine. So next, what we want to do is set the HTML body. And this is not really needed. This is kind of just like extra just to show what you can, I guess, do. But so we're going to say set HTML body, and this is also a string. Here, let's give it a body of, I don't know, something like, here's the, oh, and I have to escape that single quote, like so. We're going to say, here's the invoice PDF you requested, something like that. I don't know, just kind of making stuff up at this point. And lastly, let's go ahead and not forget to actually attach that attachment. So we're going to say mail.set file attachments. And in here, again, I'm going to go ahead and use this alternative version of denoting a list. And as to why I'm using this alternative way of denoting a list, there really is no reason. I've just seen it used like this in Trailhead and a lot of code. So I'm kind of sticking to that. So in here, we're going to basically just attach the attachment like that. And lastly, we actually have to send the email off. So to do so, we're going to say messaging dot send email like that. And again, I know this is like the 1,000th time I've said this, but this isn't by no means production code, so we're not doing any error handling. All I'm going to do is just send the email itself. And we will do so by, again, creating a new messaging.single email message list, and we'll pass in that mail object that we created right here. So by doing so, we're able to successfully create a PDF right here using the parameters we received from our, I guess at this point, imaginary Salesforce ScreenFlow that we'll create in a second, and basically just send that email to whoever needs it. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. Feel free to let me know in the comments down below if none of this is making sense or you need me to explain it in a different way. I'll be happy to help. Anyways, once we have all of this, we can now go into our Salesforce, and you'll see here, basically just go to the setup and search for flows. You'll come across this right here. Like I said, just search for flows, click on this, and you'll have this page right here. Let's go ahead and just create a new flow. When we do so, we're taken to the flow builder, and it'll ask us what type of flow we're looking to use. Use a screen flow. That's will work for our purpose. I'll just choose freeform. Doesn't really matter. What we want to do is create a screen element right here, and we'll give this label of email invoice PDF. That's fine. In our footer, let's go ahead and remove some of these buttons because we don't really need all these buttons. I will go ahead and say, let's hide the pause button, hide the previous button. And for the finish button, let's go ahead and give that a label. So I will say email invoice, like that. And let's go ahead and use a email component. Let's drag that right there. And here, let's just give this a label of, I guess, email, probably fine. And also we need to do one more thing. In order to know that we actually want to send an invoice out, unfortunately, I don't think you can give this a value of like true or something to pass into some other component. So I'm going to go ahead and use the checkbox. If the checkbox is checked, once this is clicked, then we'll have some logic to actually call that method we created. Like I said, I don't think it's possible, and I may be wrong because I haven't used flows that much. There's no way of basically tying this click button or button click right here to an action. So we have to make use of this checkbox. Let's give this a name. We'll just call this email, I guess. I don't know. I'm kind of running out of names. It looks like we already have an API name set for that. So I'll just say something like, we'll call this generate, I guess. Since technically we have to generate the PDF before we can send it, that's fine. For the flow label, that's already set. So like I said, basically, this is the form that will at some point we'll add to the account page layout. And all the user has to do is give an email, click this checkbox right here, or check this checkbox, and then click this button right here. And that'll fire off that method we created. So let's go ahead and click on done. And let's tie this to the start right here. So when this flow starts, it will call this screen right here. And what we have to do is we have to create a decision. And essentially, if that checkbox was checked and the email address is populated, then we will do some other thing. So we're going to say, we'll just call this one should email PDF or something like that. Don't really know. You'll see here we have a bunch of different outcomes. What I'm going to do is this outcome, we'll call this email PDF. And we will go to this outcome whenever the checkbox is checked. So if that equals true right here. And additionally, let's go ahead and make sure that that email right here, let's go ahead and grab the value of the email like that. We want to make sure that I guess we can use equals, I'm trying to think. So we'll say it does not equal an empty string. Yeah, so basically the user has to populate that email. So if it's not an empty string and the checkbox was checked, then we can go ahead and go do something. So let's go ahead and tie this right here. And if that's the case, at this point, we should probably go ahead and create that argument. As I said right here, this method generate PDF expects to receive a list of strings. And then again, that's because it's bulkified, or it has to be bulkified. But let's go click on manager, click on new resource right here. And we're going to create a variable. And this is going to be called, I guess this is just generate PDFargs. I'm just going to call it that. And the data type should be text. We have to make sure we check this checkbox right here, allow multiple values. This basically will make sure that the variable we're creating is of type collection. And let's check this checkbox right here, available for inputs, because we want to basically populate this variable we're creating at some point. So let's go ahead and click done. you'll see here we now have a new variable, collection variable called generate PDFargs. To populate that, let's go back into our elements and let's click on this assignment element right here. And let's call this just set args, I guess. I'm kind of running out of names, but that's fine. So in here, let's look for our collection variable we just created, and we're going to add something to it. And like I said in our dev console, we kind of are making the assumption that the first element in that list, in the nested list, is going to be the email, and the second one is going to be some record ID. So let's go ahead and ensure we do that. The first one, it will be the email. So let's go ahead and go into our screen component, which is right here. Let's click into here, and we're going to get the value of the email. And secondly, again, we want to add another thing to our collection variable. So let's go ahead and click on the add operator. And now we should probably create that record ID. And that record ID, it's going to come from the actual account page layout. So let's go ahead and create a new resource. And here it's going to be another variable. And we'll just call this record ID. And I think it's asking for the API name. So we'll use an underscore right there. This will be of type text. And lastly, this should also be checked right here, available for input, since we're going to expect that this variable is populated when the account page layout is opened. And that'll make more sense in a second. But let's go ahead and just click on done. So essentially, if when that screen is opened or visible and the user provides an email and checks the generate checkbox, it should then lead to that decision that goes into this assignment. And basically, we're just going to populate that generate PDF or args collection variable with these values right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually connect that right here. And you'll see here, it's asking us what is the decision. So essentially, if that criteria is met, what should be the outcome? And essentially, we're saying it should be the email PDF. So if we do that right here, if we click into it, you'll see here that this was the name of our outcome. So if this criteria is met, then the next step will be that we go ahead and assign that collection variable the values that we need. Once that is done, lastly, we want to create an action. So let's go ahead and drag this in right here. And what we're going to look for is of type Apex action right here. And if we click into here, we'll see that at the bottom we have our email invoice PDF. And that pops up because we titled this label email invoice PDF. So let's go ahead and click this right here and let's give this a name. We're going to say generate and email PDF. Okay, like so. And you'll see here that there are some input values. This is found because this method right here has an argument or a parameter in this case. So we want to say yes, include it. And what we're going to include is that collection variable that we've created. So as you can see here, it's kind of like tying it nicely. We created our screen, and that screen, if the criteria is met, we can't see it here, but basically it's setting the arguments of that collection variable we defined. Once that's set here, this Apex action is going to call that method and it's going to pass in those variables or that variable that we created. So let's click on done and we'll tie it right here. Once we have all of this, and let me go ahead and kind of make it a little bit neater, we can go ahead and click on save right here. And we have to give this a name. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this generate and email invoice PDF, like that. Click on save. And it looks like we already have a flow or process named that from earlier. So let's go ahead and I'll just call this one because I'm feeling very original right now. And yeah, I did have one because I was testing this out earlier. So let's go ahead and click on save with that new name. You'll see here it was saved, and we can click on activate to activate it in our actual org itself. So we'll do that. But for now, I want to click on this debug button, which is kind of nice to know that it exists. When you do that, it's going to go ahead and open it up in a debug type of console, and it's going to ask us some information. Here, it's asking us for the record ID of some record we want to operate on. I'm going to go ahead and go into this ABC computing account record that I have, and I'm going to go ahead and steal that record ID. And let's just paste that into here. So essentially we're saying that we want to run this flow that we just created on this record right here. When we click on run, you'll see here we have this screen flow that we created. So if I go ahead and just put some dummy email right there, test@test.com, and you can put an actual email and it will send it out. But for now, let's go ahead and try just testing it without checking this checkbox to see what happens. So if we click on email invoice, and we look on the right side right here, we can see some things happen. So the screen was created with the value of test.test.com, which is what was expected. And we clicked on the next button right here, and you can see that the decision was to skip and not go to that email PDF route that we chose because we didn't check that checkbox, as you can see right here. And in reality, I think when we actually put this screen flow on a page, you won't even be able to click on the next button because I think there's some email input validation. But it's good to know that at least here using this debug, we can see that we got the expected outcome. Let's go ahead and run it one more time. And this time we will click on this checkbox right here, and we'll click on, or we'll just type in test@test.com one more time, and we'll click on email invoice. And you'll see here now something else happened. The decision after we clicked on that next button was to go to the next step, because you'll see here that the checkbox was true and it contained an input. So it went ahead and assigned that collection variable the values. So you see here it is a list of strings, the first one being the email as expected, and the second one being that record ID. And then it was able to call our method that has that invocable method annotation. So it looks like it's working just fine, which means that we should be able to go ahead and go back into our account right here. And let's go ahead and modify that page layout. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the setup right here, click on edit page. And all we have to do on the left-hand side, we have to look for a component called flow and basically just drag it anywhere you want on the screen. And you'll see here that we have a flow. And on the right-hand side, we can choose which flow we want to use. So in this case, like I said earlier, I had already created one for testing purposes, and the one we just created together is this one right here with the 1 at the end. So let's go ahead and choose that one. And when that happens, all we need to do now is basically right under record ID, just check this checkbox right here. And essentially, we're now ensuring that the record ID of whichever account we're on is going to be passed in to our screen flow itself. And that's all we have to do. So let's go ahead and click on save. And let's go ahead and go back. And now, once the page is done loading, you'll see here, and it doesn't look great because I'm not going to spend much trouble styling this page, but our screen flow is now active in our org on the accounts page. So as an example, I'll go ahead and put an actual email here. For this testing purpose, I'm going to go ahead and use the email address I had created for one of my previous videos on how to, I guess, create a website for very cheap, which is also in my channel if you're interested in that. But the name of this email is called theladspodcast42@gmail.com. So I've gone ahead and opened up the email so you can kind of see it arrive if this does indeed work. So let's go ahead and type in theladspodcast42@gmail.com. And actually, let me go ahead and copy this to my clipboard. Let's go ahead and try clicking on this email invoice. And you'll see here that it actually did go through. So it looks like there isn't any input validation as I originally thought there was, which I'm sure there's probably something you can do in our screen flow to ensure that that's the case. But anyways, let's go ahead and type our email one more time and click on the generate button right here. And this time, let's click on email invoice. And there is no message output, but if we go back into our email, you see here we've now received a brand new email. If we click on it, you'll see here is the body of that email that we had crafted earlier. Here's the invoice PDF we requested. Here is the subject, and here is the actual PDF itself, which looks pretty much the same as the invoice we created many videos ago. So to kind of wrap it up, this is basically how you can go ahead and use a screen flow to trigger the use of this Apex class and Visualforce page to create a PDF. And I guess I do kind of want to put a caveat to this. This is a result of kind of like looking around for 30 minutes or so to see if it was possible. So if you're much more experienced with flows than I am, and you know that there's a much easier way of doing so, feel free to let me know down in the comments section below. But yeah, I think that will do it for today's video. Let me know if you guys found this useful, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.